All right, let's go on ahead and kick this off. Hey, everybody, welcome to another KeeperDAO Community Call. I'm WhatstheDeetz here, taking over to talk more about finding alpha on chain today. So with me today, I've got Hazard, our lab's co-founder, core team engineer, and our special guest today, we've got Alex Svanevik from Nansen, their CEO. You can find Alex at A Svanevik on Twitter, or you can go check out their website at Nansen.ai. Alex has been in the crypto space since at least 2017. He's worked in artificial intelligence and data science. And before founding Nansen with Lars and Evgeny, he had some other great work experience around crypto. I don't want to spend too much time doing a little backlog introduction to him. I will say, though, he did a fantastic interview on the FTX podcast back in July. I would highly recommend everyone go check that out to hear a little bit more about him and the Nansen story. But why don't we launch right into today's agenda? So today we're going to be pretty straightforward to the point. First, we really appreciate Alex getting up nice and early for us on a Friday morning. So we're going to obviously give him some time to speak. We're going to get into our bigger conversation and then try to get to our community calls in a good time, because I know Alex is booked right after this as well. So we, first want to just say appreciate your time, but we're looking forward to this conversation. So as we dive in, Alex will talk about Nansen. We will, kind of maybe look into what goes into a platform and building a platform like Nansen. We'll talk about what traders, NFT buyers, and others in the crypto space are doing with big data. And then we'll get to our community questions and KeeperDAO updates. But for now, I'd love to hand the microphone, so to say, off to Alex and let him introduce himself and talk a little bit about Nansen. So Alex, take it away.
Thank you very much, and GM to everyone. Thanks for the introduction. I think you did a good job covering my background there. But effectively, I'm the CEO of Nansen, a blockchain analytics platform, which these days is used a lot for NFTs. So discovering NFT collections, doing due diligence on them to figure out which ones might be worth holding on to. And also, it's traditionally been used a lot for DeFi, which maybe is more relevant for KeeperDAO. So it started out in 2020 when we launched the platform in April. And I actually used Nansen myself quite a lot in the beginning of the yield farming craze. So figuring out who else was farming Wi-Fi, for example, when that was going on, trying to understand where the smart money was moving, capital flowing into different smart contracts and so on. And we have sort of evolved a bit to become what some people think of as kind of the Bloomberg of digital assets, or Bloomberg for crypto, or Bloomberg for JPEGs these days. So that's a bit about Nansen. I'm happy to talk about anything related to Nansen and other topics as well: Pangoose, NFTs, JPEGs, you name it.
That's awesome, Alex. Thank you. I think just, for folks that might not be as familiar with the story or with your platform, I'd love to first just tell me about how you built your original team and what went into kind of this, going from, this idea to delivering the product that it is today.
Yeah, so I was originally drawn into the crypto space because I felt that there's an abundance of data in crypto, but I also recognized that being a very immature industry, you didn't really have a lot of good analytics products. And so that was something that intrigued me. And in 2017, I left my job to take the plunge into the crypto world. And my first job was to build a data team, a crypto startup in Hong Kong. So I packed my bags and moved from Barcelona to Hong Kong early 2018. And one of the guys I brought on board was Evgeny, because when we were trying to do on-chain data for this startup, we first started building our own sort of data pipelines and ingestion mechanisms. But when we were doing research, I came across Evgeny's open source project, Ethereum ETL. And Ethereum ETL, for those who don't know, is the biggest open source project to ingest blockchain or Ethereum data for analytics. So if you want to run like SQL queries or spin up your own relational database with Ethereum data, you can do that with Ethereum ETL. And so he had started working on that, I think, early 2018. And I discovered his GitHub repository, I think a week after he published it. So I somehow managed to find a way to contact him. We jumped on a call. He was not working in the crypto industry then. He was, I think, working in a consultancy, if I recall correctly, in Bangkok. And then basically, I sort of persuaded him to join crypto full-time and join my team in Hong Kong, although he was working remotely in Bangkok. And so this crypto startup, to make a long story short, did not succeed. It basically failed miserably. But we built up a strong little data team there of data scientists and data engineers. And, you know, Evgeny and I were keen to take this further and, you know, use Ethereum ETL perhaps in a commercial setting, because it's tricky with open source projects. Like if you don't have a way to tokenize the project, you have to find some other kind of commercial way to fund the development of it and to keep working on it in a sustainable manner. And so we were thinking about this quite a bit. And I think about a year later, we had also created D5, which was a small data science DAO that we had created to kind of do, it's like a micro DAO to do like consulting work in the crypto space. And I had been working with 0x, as helping them with analytics on DEX slippage across the market early 2019. And, you know, we worked with lots of different clients there through that DAO. But, you know, we also figured that we wanted to build products ourselves. And so then a third person came in here who was also part of the same DAO, Lars, and he's a data engineer. And so Lars and I started playing around with the idea of building the world's biggest database of Ethereum wallets. And so just having a way to kind of build up a repository of associations between entities and addresses. So we started working on this. And then, of course, we figured we should bring Evgeny in as pretty much the world's leading expert on blockchain data. And so, so we got him in as well. And this evolved into more of like a holistic analytics platform over time after doing some user testing. And then in April 2020, we launched the product with a $9 trial to see if anyone would pay for it. We got our first customer on the first day of launching, which is great. And yeah, and then it's just been pretty much a fun ride since then.
That's awesome. Well, what a cool story. You know, I think Hazard's got a question for you here.
Yeah. So something I've always thought is interesting is, you know, people talk a lot about how, you know, cryptocurrency as an industry is sort of part of the reason, you know, I guess part of this is explained by the fact, oh, well, it's a young industry, but it's sort of full of information asymmetries, right? So there's like a euphemism for people in smoke-filled back rooms who are kind of, they're aware of things before the general public or whatever, right? You know, I always thought it was funny because, you know, at the same time, it's built around, the whole thing is built around, you know, generally this sort of really remarkably public ledger that basically lets everybody in theory see everything that's happening. But as we know, you know, it can kind of just be gobbledygook and it's not really accessible. So I was curious, you know, do you see Nansen as part of a way to kind of democratize or make that information that's on chain more kind of accessible? And do you think we're kind of trending towards more or less information asymmetry, or do you even think about that?
Oh yeah, I think about this a lot. I think it's a great point. My mental framework for this is that markets are typically, you can have efficiency, or rather you can have inefficiency, but then you typically have high transaction costs, or vice versa. If you have low transaction costs, you have efficiency in markets. And so if you think about the equities market or like public stocks, that market is very efficient, which is kind of bad as a trader because it's hard to outperform the market. But it has low transaction costs, which is good. And so these things are somehow related. And then if you think about another market like real estate is relatively inefficient. Like I can find mispriced property, all over the world if I just spend enough time on it. But the transaction costs are very high. So if I find like an amazing building in, I don't know, Hanoi, Vietnam, that's cool, but like the transaction cost and the time it takes to kind of execute on that transaction is very high. So it takes a long time. So crypto is interesting because it's inefficient, but it also has low transaction costs, which is very unique. And that means, you can discover things in the crypto space where, hey, this is clearly, I have an information edge, or this is mispriced for whatever reason. And then you can go ahead and make the transaction within seconds. And of course, we all know Ethereum gas prices are high, but of course it doesn't compare to how much it costs to, say, purchase a property, for example, in transaction costs. So it's kind of a unique market right now. And the consequence of this is that information becomes exceptionally valuable. And so I think Nansen fits into that mental framework where you're happy to, for example, pay for high quality information because it allows you to, first of all, discover these opportunities, and second of all, perform due diligence on them. And then lastly, actually pull the trigger in some cases and invest or trade. So I definitely think that Nansen, is an important piece of the puzzle in that regard. And yeah, like I do think we are democratizing to some extent the information flow. At the same time, like we are also a paid product, right? Like that's our business model in order to build a sustainable company that can last for decades. So it's not that you can just go in and kind of get all this information for free. You do have to pay for it because, and that's something we can talk about. Like
you got to pay your taxes, right? Even in it.
Yeah. Like that's something we can talk about as well. There's like, I would say, a coherent philosophy behind the decision of like making sure it's not free or having this business model that we have right now. But I also think that over time, Nansen will follow kind of like the Tesla playbook, where you start out building a product that is primarily for like the rich enthusiasts, like the Tesla Roadster was initially. And then over time, as you get a bigger team, you have a bigger factory, so to speak, you learn more about how to build a great product. You can go more and more out to the mainstream, and you can make your product more and more accessible as well.
Yeah, that's totally awesome. So I think a lot of people here, a lot of people in the DAO and stuff use Nansen AI. I've used it before. I think you're probably aware, on crypto Twitter, I don't know to what extent that into your business plans, probably little, but on-chain metrics can sometimes kind of get a lot of shit, right? Maybe they're too slow, or they're sort of indicating the obvious. So I wouldn't say that that's necessarily true of the Nansen product. So I'm curious, what makes a tool like yours different? And like, what's most important for you and your team when you're thinking about, how to make your data more actionable for traders or investors? Like, what do you like think about in terms of KPIs and where the value is in the data you're kind of delivering?
Yeah, I think the first point is that the danger or the risk that you run when you build an analytics product in crypto is that you just try to like recreate whatever exists in traditional markets. But the unique thing about crypto is that you can have this incredible granularity down to individual transactions in real time. And so I think when we built Nansen, we recognized that you can't just base your product on like metrics and high level KPIs. Things like, obviously everyone has access to like price information, volume, and so on. But a lot of the magic happens at the transactional level. And so we wanted to find a way that makes it easier for people to kind of zoom down or up at any level. And so when you go to Nansen.ai or pro.nansen.ai, if you have a subscription, the first thing that you see is kind of like a high level overview of projects that are kind of trending right now. And you see some charts on like stable coin flows. But within seconds, you can drill down. Like pretty much everything in Nansen, you can go from like the macro level, and you can drill yourself down to like individual addresses and individual transactions. And I think crypto is a very narrative-driven market, and narratives are often fed by individual transactions. So like if you see, hey, Alameda just put $50 million into this yield farm, that can drive a lot of activity once that information gets spread out. So I think we focused more on like the uniqueness of blockchains that allows you to have this transparency all the way down to the transaction level. That's not really something that we saw before Nansen was around. Of course, you had blockchain explorers, but we have kind of this idea that you can surface the signal to the very top, and then you can drill down from there, right? Like something like Etherscan is an amazing tool. I use it every day, but it's more like a reference or an encyclopedia. And so Nansen is more like a newspaper where we could try to surface the stuff that you are likely to care about. So I think that's the first point. The second point goes back to the pricing philosophy. So Nansen is not a free product, and there are some sort of consequences of that. The first thing is that if you're paying for something, you expect to get value back. And so it sets the bar higher for us, so that we can't just give you nice to have information. We have to give you need to have information. So it feels like if you stop paying for this product, you're really missing out. Like this was too valuable for you to stop using. And so that's what we strive to create, this kind of feeling. And that means that we have to be quite clever about how to prioritize stuff, and we have to listen a lot to what our customers want. We can't just put out, lots of different dashboards that, might be interesting. Here's a chart that goes up to the right, everyone's happy, we can share it on Twitter, but it doesn't really give you anything as an investor trader with regards to making decisions. So I think those are two main things that I would highlight where we are a bit different. The first one being that we take advantage of the fact that the blockchain is transparent and we can, go down to individual transactions and addresses. And the second point is that because we are a paid product, we have to set the bar higher when it comes to surfacing the information that people are likely to care about.
That's awesome. Hey, Alex, you bring up a really good point about, looking at boiling things down to individual transactions and individual addresses. I'm assuming that you are probably monitoring, 20 million Ethereum addresses, probably some crazy number that's high. So what I'd like to look into on that is your wallet labeling feature, and how you guys first discovered the way to, start grouping either transactions together through wallets, or you started identifying wallets and giving them specific labels, and kind of so if you could just talk about that process of labeling and what those labels kind of mean to folks.
Yeah, so currently on Ethereum, we have labeled 99.5 million addresses. So almost 100 million addresses on Ethereum alone. And then if you look at other blockchains like Polygon, Phantom, etc., the number goes above 100 million. And these addresses, if you only look at the entities, because you can classify these into two buckets, like entities, which are kind of real life entities like Binance or KeeperDAO, or even funds like Alameda, Three Arrows. That's one category, entity labels. The other category is behavioral labels. And so I would maybe distinguish between these two things. If you look at the entities, 73% of all the volume on Ethereum, we can say who the sender is. And so when I say who, I mean that is, in the vast majority of cases, like a project or an exchange or a protocol or a fund. It's not individual. It's not like we're tracking you individually. So that's pretty high coverage, right? Like we have been hovering at around 73 to 75% coverage for a while now. And the reason we do this and why this is so important is that these labels enable us to answer questions that you cannot answer without them. So some basic questions would be, how much link tokens are flowing into exchanges right now, or like how is that changing over time, or any other token, right? And which influencers are collecting which NFTs, for example, in the case where it's public, which people own which addresses, which you can, with NFTs, there's like a trivial one-to-one link between an NFT and an address. And if you post it on Twitter, obviously you're showing what address you own. And so that's why it's important. Like that's why these labels are useful, because you can answer a lot of questions that are very actionable and very useful with them. But if you don't have the addresses, you're missing out on all that. So I kind of think of this as a way to 100x the value of the on-chain data alone. Like on-chain data alone is useful, but it's 100 times more useful if you can relate it to real-world entities. And so how do we do it? Oh, of course, I get this question pretty much every time I have a call with someone. And there isn't like a silver bullet. It's not like, oh, here's this one magic, two-line algorithm that allows us to tag up addresses, right? It's more like we have built out an architecture, and I'm fortunate because my two co-founders, Evgeny and Lars, are data engineers. And so they have, between them, they have close to like 20 years experience building systems for big data, like both at startups and in large corporations. And so we can leverage their experience building out this architecture and infrastructure. But we have built this out so that it's easy for us to ship new algorithms and new heuristics as we learn more about the crypto domain. So if we're like studying, say, KeeperDAO, or we're studying an exchange and we figure out how they are managing their wallets, we can very quickly, and I mean like if someone has been trained at doing this, like within perhaps half an hour or an hour, create new heuristics that enable us to tag up addresses at scale. So that means that more than 99.9% of our labels are automatically generated. It doesn't scale to do this manually only, of course. You don't get to like 100 million addresses plus just from manually tagging addresses. But we also do have manual tagging efforts. So we have research analysts who have domain experience in crypto, but they also have tools that we have built internally. So if you wanted to do an investigation and you're looking at let's say a fundraising round for a specific DeFi protocol, we can use tools internally to figure out like what are the different funds that put money into this, and then associate the different addresses with those entities. And then you get nice network effects, right? Because next time you're doing that, you can leverage the labels we already have, and through process of elimination, you can sometimes figure out which funds own which addresses. So over time, you get this compounding effect and a positive network effect where it gets easier and easier to label. And on the flip side, if anyone is like going to start to make a Nansen clone or a copy of our company, it's really hard for them to catch up because they have to catch up with all this existing labels that we have. And then they also have to have all the architecture to roll out heuristics fast. They have to have analysts that know how to do this. They have to have the tooling for the analysts. They have to have a customer base that like gives them addresses and labels, over time, as we are missing out on stuff because, of course, we can't cover everything in real time. And so that's kind of like high level how we do it. And it is pretty difficult, to be honest, but this is also why we're scaling out the team very fast. Like we're 54 people now in the team. We've grown to that amount from like 3 people a year ago. But we need a lot of hands on deck to do this stuff, both on like the technical side, but also on the investigations and analysis side.
I mean, and that's just a great reminder for me to, again, congratulate you on that Series A that you raised a couple months back as well.
Thank you.
I was reading through your guys' September update that you published yesterday, and you released some new features for some of your products. I'd love to kind of refocus that lens on looking at kind of what NFT buyers and traders are doing. As you mentioned, things originally started by, maybe a project just posted on Twitter and that's how you found out about it. Or you were in a Discord and somebody linked to a contract address. Now you look at what's being done in real time. And I'd love for you to talk more about, your features on the NFT side, NFT Paradise, NFT Godmode, the wallet breakdown, just how those are being utilized by traders and buyers and mentors right now to find what the best projects are and what they should maybe cut if they don't, they're not seeing the data they want to see.
Yeah, so the funny thing about the NFT features is that we kind of had it on our list for a while to make an equivalent of the Token Godmode dashboard, which used to be the most popular dashboard on Nansen for NFTs. And so we got a great research analyst on board who was really into NFTs. And we said, maybe you should just try to take a stab at building like the NFT Godmode. And he took it very seriously and came back with, something that effectively was the first version of the NFT Godmode that you see in Nansen today. And then eventually added also NFT Paradise. And so it's been kind of funny because we thought, we'll just add this. It'll be another interesting dashboard for people to use. But at this point, right, this is like literally the most used, the NFT dashboards are the most used feature like across the platform, and more than 80% of our users use them. And so what are these dashboards? So NFT Paradise is effectively a ranking of the hottest NFT collections right now. And so it just shows you which NFT collections have the most traded volume. And this, is actually a pretty good indicator to understand like what people are looking at. And if you look on Twitter, you see often projects popping up, and very often you see also increased trading volume as well in NFT Paradise. Of course, the advantage of on-chain data is that it's always going to be faster on like the transactions themselves. The information of someone making a trade, comes directly from the on-chain data. So you will always, when someone makes a trade, you'll always know about it first by looking at the on-chain data. Of course, if someone is telling you that they're gonna buy, then you will know it on Twitter. But to see them actually make the transaction, on-chain data is the primary source. So in NFT Paradise, you can see the most traded NFT collections. You also see, estimates of market cap based on the price of the floor price of a collection multiplied by the number of units. You see things like the floor price, average price, and the max price. You see number of transactions, number of unique wallets that hold these collections. And so it's just a really good place to go to understand like what's hot right now and what should you be looking at, based on which metric you care about. Then, as with the Surface the Signal mission that we have and that I talked about earlier, you can click through on any of these collections, right? So if you're looking at NFT Paradise, you can click through on like Mechaverse and try to understand, hey, what's actually going on with Mechaverse? How is the price evolving? Who is actually buying this? Do you have activity from notable buyers, right? And looking at Mechaverse right now, I think there was a trait reveal recently. And so for a while, pretty much all the NFTs were trading, around the same price. And then as soon as you have a trait reveal, you get a huge discrepancy in the pricing of these items. And that makes sense because some of them are going to be more rare than others. And so you can see this very clearly happening in the on-chain data. And you can even see the individual transactions where you can see what are the most notable addresses that have been buying these NFTs. And you can literally see kind of like the explosion on price discrepancy happening when the trade reveal happened. And in fact, I think I'll post a tweet about this afterwards. The chart looks pretty cool. So you can kind of go from the top and like not know much about NFTs at all and learn about these different collections, and then you can drill down and understand them, to the point where like who are the top holders that have bought these NFTs, kind of aggregate statistics on like how many unique addresses own them and how many NFTs do those hold on average, right? So it's really just, Bloomberg for JPEGs is like the short way to describe it. But it is pretty funny that NFTs have become such a part of our offering, given that they started out as like a side project. And, at this point, I think we're certainly among the leading NFT analytics platforms. Maybe number one. I would like to number one, but, people can make up their own mind. So, so that's where we're at.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think, NFTs are something that kind of they didn't come out of nowhere, but maybe that wasn't what was being thought about last year, for example. So I'm kind of curious. I'm going to ask sort of a typical Silicon Valley question, right? Is where do you see your next 100,000 or next million users, right? When you're looking ahead to the next year, where do you think they are?
So I think it is one of the advantages. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about having like a data platform that is very flexible and allows you to move very fast. And that's how we built the labeling, but that's also how we've built the dashboard creation and generally how we approach product development. And so that allows us to stay, at the frontier of what's happening in the blockchain industry. And so now that so NFTs were really hot last year. DeFi was very hot last year, and NFTs have been really hot this year. It's hard to predict what the next thing will be. I think there's like a continuation within the NFT space on lots of different trends. I think gaming is a massive one. I think it's just such a no-brainer to, use NFTs in gaming and to be able to bring your items with you between different games and platforms. At some point, right now, like if you're a game studio, you're kind of benefiting from building in a closed garden because you can sort of keep the users there. You can keep the transactional volume of your in-game items or whatever it is within your ecosystem. At some point, though, there will be enough open platforms to the point where there's kind of like a flippening, and people, as a game studio, you won't be able to afford to have a closed garden. You have to open up. And so if you want to bring, say, like millions of Axie gamers into your platform, you have to open up so you can bring your Axies into that game. So I think and then there's a lot more to talk about in the gaming space, but I definitely think like gaming is going to be one, and we have to figure out like how to support that use case. We have added support for Ronin, which is Axie Infinity's chain, and I would expect more game studios to start building on Ronin because it just makes more sense than like building your own blockchain. Why not use their blockchain when they have millions of users that already have a wallet, they all have funds there? Why wouldn't you also just build on Ronin, right? So that's gaming. That's kind of like a continuation of NFTs. I also think that probably there's going to be might be a slower grind, but there's a lot of interesting stuff around decentralized autonomous organizations or DAOs. I mean, KeeperDAO, I guess, like to some extent falls into the category, but there's tons around like governance and voting and human networks of coordination, where I think actually the space will benefit dramatically from transparency. And so being able to support that in different ways, it's still kind of like very fragmented, like how DAOs are run today and like even the meaning of the term DAO and so on. So I think we can probably be helpful in DAOs as well. Is it going to bring us like 1 million users next year? Probably not. I think NFTs are still the area where you could imagine getting 1 million users, or millions, or tens or hundreds of millions if you look far enough into the future. So NFTs is probably the area where I can see us getting like lots and lots of users, but that doesn't mean that's the only thing we want to focus on. Like DeFi is interesting because maybe it's not a huge area in number of people, but it is pretty big in terms of capital, and so that makes it quite valuable, like as an area. And so I'd say maybe boring answer, but like DeFi, on the capital side, NFTs for people, and then eventually things like DAOs might be an area where we can provide a lot of value, but I don't think it's going to be like a mainstream thing anytime soon. And then just wanted to add as well, there are a few related things like the creator economy and sort of like social tokens and things like that, which are kind of related a bit to NFTs and influencers and also DAOs. So that's another thing that might be interesting to follow.
For sure. Well, I have like 1,000 more questions on my own end, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So why don't we hop over to some of the community questions that were submitted to us from the KeeperDAO folks. So let me just ask you the first one. So the first one is, do you plan to offer easier trading options from inside Nansen itself and allow users to buy or trade from your platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think that's the unique thing with blockchains, right? Because we can just hook into like Matcha or 1inch or even directly to like Uniswap or something on the back end. We don't have to build like the exchange. We can just leverage DeFi. And so we don't have any specific plans to roll that out anytime soon, but it seems like a no-brainer to do this eventually. And so I would say in the long term, very likely, but yeah, in the short term.
Awesome. The next question comes from another one of our community members. What does it take to get hired at Nansen, and are you hiring?
Great question. We are indeed hiring. So if you go to nansen.ai/careers, you can see job openings that we have published. There are also many job openings coming. So if you don't find anything that's suitable there, you can also just email careers@nansen.ai. So what does it take to get a job? Well, we do tend to, hire people who have a bit of experience within the function that they're applying for. So if you're like a research engineer or if you're a data engineer, software engineer, we would expect to see, at least some years of experience. For more senior roles, it could be quite a lot more. So like 7+ years of experience. But we like to see candidates who have kind of done some work in the past. Like we typically don't focus that much on people coming like straight from university and so on. Although we do have internships, so that's something to consider. But for the sort of a classic kind of full-time job, we do look for people who have a few years of experience within their specialty or function. And then it's actually not super important for us that people are very plugged into crypto. It is, of course, a bonus. And if you're a research analyst, then it is a must, right? You need to understand the crypto industry. You can't really just be thrown into the crypto world and expect to, create research and publish content on this crazy world if you haven't had much experience with it. We don't expect that you have working experience. So if you've been like a community member in DAOs, or if you have just generally been like trading or investing in crypto and you've been engaged on a hobby basis, that's like in many cases like more than enough when it comes to crypto experience. And so I think Nansen is also maybe a bit different from a few other crypto projects because we don't focus that much on things like solidity, right? So you can sort of bring, if you're a technical person, you can bring the sort of Web 2 skills into Nansen and still create value. If you're like a React developer or a Python developer, or if you know how to write SQL, these are very useful skills that we look for and that you will make use of every day at Nansen. So that's one note on like the skills and the experience that we expect to see, and like crypto experience. And the crypto experience, again, like it's a bonus in most cases, and in some roles it doesn't really matter at all. But I guess most people listening to this are crypto interested. And then, I personally have a strong sense of purpose, like why we exist as a company, and the job that we have to do as a company is to help grow the whole industry. And so the idea is that if we can help the pioneers that join the crypto space become winners, then those winners will reinvest in the space, they will fund other projects, and they will also serve as role models to get more people to join the crypto industry. And so I think it's great when I see candidates share that purpose, when you see people who are excited about the whole industry and like making sure that the future of finance becomes a reality. And so very often I speak to candidates who you can tell they're very excited about this. I spoke to someone yesterday who said that it's very exciting to work in an asset class that might save my generation. because there's a lot of, apathy and sort of frustration that like the boomers have all the wealth, and then our generation, maybe crypto is the thing that will like save us from like a financial perspective to some extent. Like it's going to be, that's a big topic on its own, but it's going to be a heavy burden to lift to cover like, all the pensions and like all the debt that's been accrued by governments and all this stuff. Maybe crypto is like the reset. So I think like candidates that have a strong sense of purpose is great, because it kind of like allows you to get through tough times as well. If there's like a bear market and you were only here for the NFT flipping and that was it, maybe it's going to be a challenge for you to sort of stick around for the long term. But if you have a strong sense of purpose, also something.
For sure. And I also do want to plug, just because, someone like me who doesn't have the, let's call it technical knowledge or experience that a lot of engineers do, I did find your Nansen Scouts program that was more wallet monitoring and data entry. And I thought that was a really cool way to introduce people to both your platform and higher end data. So I just wanted to throw a show out there for you.
Thanks for plugging that, and thanks for reminding me. We just published a post on this, and so just to give a bit more context on that, we get a lot of people contacting us who are like, "Hey, I'm a university student, like I can't afford paying for Nansen or whatnot." And so we thought about like how can we do something that like makes sense both ways here, where maybe they can get access to Nansen, but we also get some help from them in return. And so we created this Scouts program where people basically help us with labeling. Like some of the labeling we do has to be manual, right? Like you can never get around some of the labeling that just, you need human input. And so what we do is we give people a free Nansen VIP account, which basically people pay like $1,500 a month for. And then they help us with labeling on the platform. And they also, are in this Discord channel where we share notes and, help each other do this labeling. And it helps us like grow our coverage, so we can stay at the frontier. But also these scouts get access to Nansen itself, and they also get rewards. Like they also get stablecoin rewards based on like how much they're contributing. So if you're helping us tag up addresses that are responsible for a lot of on-chain volume, we will pay out stablecoin bonuses to you like on a monthly basis as well. So I think it's like a pretty nice win-win setup where we don't have like our own governance token, so we can't just give like people tokens to help out. But we found that this is kind of like a close substitute for that, where like you're getting to use the product and you're also getting a monetary upside with cash incentives effectively. And so this is one way that we could try to gradually decentralize to some extent, where the contributors to Nansen are not just people who are full-time employees, but also the community more broadly.
I mean, that's just so cool. And really, it's something that I would encourage people that want to learn more to hop in. You mentioned, just because you guys don't have like a governance token or something like that, it leads right into one of our next questions, which would be, it seems like a lot of crypto related resources have, either a native token or a subscription method, or maybe plans to. Do you see potentially tokenizing Nansen being appealing to you compared to kind of your current just subscription model?
Yeah, the challenging thing with tokens is that issuing a token is irreversible. And so that means you have to distinguish in decision making between irreversible decisions and reversible ones. I'm very happy to pull the trigger quickly on reversible decisions, where if we learn something new, we can go back on them. Issuing a token is effectively irreversible. So I feel like it would be a massive risk to tokenize this early, because we don't know exactly how the token should function. Like we don't have a good token model. I haven't seen a great token model for like, say, gated access to a product like Nansen. I mean, there are some examples out there. I think if you look at the market caps, these projects, it indicates that maybe they're not really as valuable as we would hope them to be. So I think a lot of it has to do with this notion of that it's irreversible, and I wouldn't rule it out. Like I don't think if we either came up with a model that makes a lot of sense or someone else came up with a model that makes sense, I think we would certainly consider it very seriously. But you also have to consider the kind of user experience of this. Like many people are actually happy just to pay with Ether today, right? To use Nansen, where you just go to Nansen.ai and you get it, you work your way to the pricing page. You see, oh, you can buy like a yearly or a monthly subscription, and you can just send Ether and you're done. Like you don't need to like mess around with tokens that you need to understand, like what's the tokenomics around it, how does it work. You just know that you can send like $150 worth of Ether and you can use the product right away. So there's also a user experience aspect to this. And I don't really see us kind of like removing that sort of smooth flow anytime. So like, how do you then do it? Like if you're going to have a token, is it possible to have a hybrid model where some people are paying, but then other people are using the token? Maybe, but that also kind of caps the value of the token perhaps a bit if people want to speculate on it, right? So there are all these considerations. And then there's like governance, right? Where Nansen is still a very young product where I think maybe this is a controversial thing to say. I think it benefits from some degree of benevolent dictatorship. So, I'm happy for now to be the dictator of Nansen and eventually maybe centralize, but I think it would slow things down a lot if we went too heavy on the decentralization in the governance process. So, and I know this because like I'm a DAO member myself. Like I'm a member. I've started a DAO. Like I'm a member of many other DAOs, like Pleaser DAO and Lido, and these are great projects. But like, in order for us to ship things really fast, like we definitely benefit from some degree of centralization and governance right now. So I'm a big believer in gradual decentralization and like thoughtful decentralization. So I would definitely not rule it out, but we don't have any specific plans to create a governance token for Nansen or an access token like now.
It's a great answer. Especially on making decisions that are irreversible versus reversible. It's some awesome insight. Why don't we wrap it up with one last question from the community? And we'll bring it back because, you started this off by saying that, you were pretty much using the platform before, you guys had customers. So could you, in your time of being, first user to today, could you talk about like what's the most interesting or surprising discovery you've made on your own platform?
That's such a great question and a difficult one to answer. I mean, in terms of surprises, I would say I've discovered a lot of projects through Nansen. So like, Bored Apes, hash masks, like tons of NFT collections. The first time I ever saw like the name was because I saw a lot of money moving into it in Nansen. So like the discovery part, I've learned about a lot of these projects through Nansen. Then, there are examples where I've sort of spotted things where maybe a crypto fund is doing an OTC deal with the token team, and it's not super obvious the way they do it. For example, they might use something like Sablier, like the streaming protocol where you can stream tokens in real time to an address. And so you can imagine sending, like, let's say you're buying $1 million tokens, and then they're subject to vesting, and so in real time. And so the token team will maybe stream these tokens to the fund. But the way you would discover it is by seeing that now Sablier has increased in token balance. And so there was one example where I figured out the pretty well-known DeFi fund had done an OTC deal with a very small project, and it was evident from the on-chain data. And I had to do a bit of digging where you had to actually look into the Sablier like events, figure out that, hey, this new vesting stream was set up at this point in time. And then, lo and behold, like a week later, they announced that they had made this investment, the token price pumped as you'd expect. And so there are examples like that out there. And yeah, that was like one example, which was like a crystal clear one. I think I covered it also in one of our YouTube videos with Nansen. So Yeah, that's one example that comes.
That's so cool. It's really cool. Not having to learn from an insider, but really using your own research to find those opportunities. It's really just such a great opportunity.
It feels
Well,
so
Alex,
much better. Well, like it just feels so good. Like when you discover something like that and you act on it, and it's like, wow, that was a pretty clean, investment. Think about it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Alex, hey, we really appreciate you coming through, talking to Hazard and myself in our community. This has been, super educational. I really do also want to point people back over to Nansen.ai. And if you've never tried it before, $9 for a 7-day trial. You can go see what's minting right now, who's holding the right coins. It is just such an awesome platform. So, had to get that last plug in for you, but really huge thank you, giving us the time this morning. I know you're super busy, so just a huge thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to come on anytime.
Awesome. Well, hey, for the rest of the call, we are, looking at, I know that some of you guys are interested in POAPs, and so we do have a POAP for you guys today for this call here with Alex. Not sure if any of you guys have paid attention to POAP in their news lately, but they have drastically reduced and restricted usage as they kind of revamp their security and offerings. They had been going through a number of issues that have kind of boiled to the surface. So now, I've been able to get a POAP for this. What's going to happen if you want a POAP? You're going to send me a DM and I'll send it directly to you. You might have to wait a little bit as I will have to do this all individually as they've cut their offerings in terms of their website and their DM bot and things like that. So it'll come straight to me. DM what's the deets if you do want your POAP. But looking ahead, we got a few updates for KeeperDAO. You'll notice that we did an announcement that this week our KIP zeros and 1 passed through the snapshot objection voting. So really huge thank you to everybody that put their Rook out there and voted to pass those. We also have last call for KIPs 2, 3, and 4 that are already actually have gone through self-on review as well. And those snapshots will start on Saturday for voting as well. So stay tuned for more of that. We're really excited about those next KIPs, whether it's emissions reductions, the labs budget, or using profits to buy back our Rook token. I think all of these opportunities are super exciting. We're really appreciative of all the community members that have put their ideas out there, that have, not just that, they've commented on things, they've written their own proposals. So just really a big thank you to all the community members that are participating in governance with us. And then the last thing on governance, we still do have a number of proposals that, are still being worked through. So I'd love to host next week another workshop in town hall in the style that we did with KIP2 and our last community call as well, where we'll look at these outstanding proposals and review them as a community together. So stay tuned. I'll announce when we're going to be doing that next week. But besides that, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Alex, again, huge pleasure having you on here. Hazard, as always, I love being, smart by osmosis, just kind of being next to you on stage here. So thanks for your insight and being with us. But this has been another KeeperDAO Community Call. I'm What's the Deets, and we're going to sign off here. And don't forget, if you want your POAP, send me a DM. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.